Senior analyst for BamaOnline.com, with you each and every weekday morning from 11 a.m. until noon. The show, as always, brought to you by Peterbrook Chocolatier out there at 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa. Still there, still ready to serve you at 205-752-0211. That's right. Make the call. You can go ahead and get those pre-orders for Easter ready to go. So many different versions of old Peter Cottontail in chocolate available to you at Peterbrook Chocolatier. Also, might I recommend those chocolate dipped caramel wrapped apples. Oof, those are great. Those will cheer you up no matter what, right there at Peterbrook Chocolatier, 205-752-0211. Joined as always on the program by executive producer Josh Smith, who together we combine to form the 60-minute band of Sports Talk Radio. Josh, how are you doing on this hump day morning in Tuscaloosa?
Hey, we're doing well over here, Travis. Just enjoying the sunshine. You know, it's kind of been off and on this week. It's, you know, whether it's been overcast, getting a little bit of the showers here or there, but I think it's starting to kind of normalize here, kind of maybe finally getting out of the Seattle-like weather, which will help overall with everything going on.
It really is. It's actually a gorgeous day outside. I know we're doing the hashtag stay home thing at this point. I'm down. I'm good with that. I'm team stay home. You know, that's essentially what we're doing for the most part around Casa de Reier. But I think that still allows me to get out and about in the neighborhood. Get out, get a little walk in this morning. I was able to do that. Seeing a lot of the neighbors out and about, trying to get in just a little bit of a walk. We're maintaining the social distancing that we've had Nick Saban ask us to do here in the last day. A couple different times now we've heard from Nick in the last 24 hours. So we're certainly maintaining every precaution available to us. But as we talked about before here on the program, there is a mental side to this with isolation that has to be taken into account. And even if it entails you going out and opening your garage door or your carport or your back porch, whatever, get out and see the outdoors a little bit. Just take it in a little bit on a daily basis. 205-342-9904. That is the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line, by the way. If you'd like to check in with us on this Wednesday, we're going to talk with Cecil Hurt of the Tuscaloosa News and Tidesports.com coming up in our very next segment. We're going to talk some Alabama men's basketball, sort of a newsy week, potentially, for Nate Oates in his program. Heard from Nate yesterday, spoke on the situations involving Kyra Lewis Jr. and John Petty Jr., both those guys going to test the NBA draft waters. You saw on social media just here in the last hour from Kyra, his tweet that reaffirmed what we heard from Nate Oates yesterday, and that Kyra, without totally putting an end to his collegiate eligibility, is going to test that NBA draft. And we'll see what it even consists of, right? I mean, because there's so many variables that still have to play itself out with the NBA season that ties into the NBA draft and how that's going to work. So no surprise to hear that Kyra Lewis Jr. and John Petty both going to explore professional options. You heard Nate Oates sort of project a little bit in terms of what he might be hearing in relation to both those players. Kyra anywhere from mid-first round, late first round, maybe early second right now. John Petty maybe looking more at an undrafted situation, maybe the second round. You know, but there's still professional options out there beyond the NBA that are enticing to college basketball players, especially if you're looking at some situations in your personal life where, look, it's time to start getting paid or at least start working towards that ultimate goal. And certainly Power 5 basketball, as much as we can try to convince ourselves otherwise, or as some people try to convince themselves otherwise, that it is still truly an amateur situation. It's essentially in its own form a minor league feeding system to the National Basketball Association. But at the end of the day, if you still have options outside the NBA that entail maybe the G League, maybe Europe, and that opportunity to provide for yourself and your family from an income perspective, That's something you probably have to consider, I would think, for sure. So we'll see how that plays out and how it plays out in terms of Alabama's numbers and looking ahead to Friday when Josh Primo, a top 50-ish type recruit for the class of 2020, is expected to make his final decision on his college destination. Alabama and Creighton, the finalist for Josh Primo, 6'6", wing/combo guard. All those guys are kind of the same these days, and they all can handle the ball pretty well, as we've seen in recent years too. So Josh Primo, another guy. What's up with Toronto, by the way? Nate is he's building a wall around Toronto, it looks like. Keon Ambrose Hilton, the 6'8" forward who signed with Alabama in the signing period, ties to Toronto, and now Josh Primo, very much the same, 6'6" combo guard. So we'll see how that goes later in the week. I know the crystal balls at BamaOnline.com and the 247sports.com network are trending heavily to Josh Primo, casting his lot with the Crimson Tide here in a couple of days. Most recently of our BOL staff, Tim Watts, also Hank South, have put in crystal balls for Josh Primo to Alabama. Really, that was a month ago for those two guys. They've been ahead of it a little bit. More recently, Evan Daniels, the national recruiting analyst for us there at 247sports.com in the last day, has put in a crystal ball, a CB, as they like to call him, for the Crimson Tide and Josh Primo. 205-342-9904. That is the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line. Hey, what about Tua TV? Is this what we're about to have, Josh Smith, with these video clips now? These at least solidly produced. It's not sort of the Bigfoot footage, we had from about a week ago or so. Sasquatch sighting that we had at Tua a week ago, throwing to some high school receivers. The Tua Pruder film, as I called it, from a week ago. What we saw here in the last day or so is solidly produced, obviously, from Team Tua, his agency, Lee Steinberg, those folks, working Tua is with Trent Dilfer in getting ready for whatever work he can do in advance of the 2020 NFL draft. What about Tua Television? And Chris Cabot, who works with Lee Steinberg, I envision Chris Cabot, by the way, as sort of Jerry Maguire. If you remember the movie Jerry Maguire, Tom Cruise, how could you forget it? Cuba Gooding Jr., show me the money. Come on. Even if you're 20, 25, even if you're Josh Smith, you have to have seen Jerry Maguire. Well, Jerry Maguire, before he went out on his own, was Jerry Maguire before he was essentially unceremoniously dumped and went out on his own. That's how I sort of envision Chris Cabot in my mind. Well, Chris Cabot, working directly with Tua as part of the representation involving the Lee Steinberg group there, he spoke with Charlie Potter of BamaOnline.com yesterday, and you could tell that there's more of this coming. There's more Tua TV coming, and there should be. Tua looked really good. Understanding these were just a few individual clips and understanding that his representation isn't going to put anything out there that might make Tua even the least amount compromised still from that hip injury. Tua looked good. I was surprised. I was surprised he was able to do what he was doing. And I'm talking about going from under center, taking a 5-7 step type drop, moving both left and right, showing some very nice mobility, looking not all that far off from the Tua we saw pre his latest injury. And it makes you wonder, man, how much heat, and this is all strategic. We know that. And you know that the teams are going to request and get far more than what we're going to see on social media and as far as these video recorded, produced sort of workouts go. But here's where it can impact a team. It can really impact a team from the fan base perspective. You can get these fan bases in a tizzy, man. These fan bases that don't have quarterback situations really at all. Forget about bad quarterback situations. They don't have really a quarterback situation, some of these teams. And even the ones that feel at least semi-good about their situations, trying to put on that brave front. Like the Washington Redskins right now at number 2 overall in the 2020 NFL draft. We hear that Daniel Snyder is fine with what he currently sits with there, Dwayne Haskins, going into his second year as potentially the starting quarterback for the Washington Redskins. But do you really feel good about Dwayne Haskins? And boy, you talk about an unsettled fan base. Try to watch Washington Redskins games on the cable. Just a crazy amount of empty seats up there in the DMV, which is wild considering that for someone of my age in the formative years of football viewing and those things, you just always remembered old RFK Stadium being packed, man. You remember the Hogs, you remember Theismann, you remember John Riggins, you know? You remember those Super Bowl championship teams up in D.C. And D.C., the Redskins just far from that right now. I mean, that area is all about the Baltimore Ravens right now, man. It's a Ravens region up there. Redskins are an afterthought. So if you're the Redskins sitting there at number 2, especially that fan base, and you're seeing this sort of ramp up of Tua as he gets more and more back to his old self, you can put some heat on some front offices as a fan base. And I don't know if that's particularly by design. I don't put anything past agencies and player reps and things like that. Hey, I would look at it as you're not doing your job if that's not part of your angle right now with Steinberg and his guys and his group. If you're not trying to do that, if you're not trying to manipulate the narrative or manipulate the evaluation process of clubs right now with Tua, you're doing a disservice to him. So absolutely that should be part of that. Absolutely that should be part of that. And that's where this sort of continuation Tua TV, as I'm going to call it moving forward, could have an impact. You know, it's like my team, the Jacksonville Jaguars. We've got this brave face on us now. Gardner Minshew, yeah. Hashtag America. He's going to get it done. Hey, I love Gardner Minshew. I love his story. But here's the reality of how the path that Gardner Minshew has taken to this point nearly played out. Gardner Minshew was very close to becoming the third string quarterback at Alabama. Not just behind Tua Tagovailoa, but also behind Jalen Hurts in 2018. Now, did everyone just miss on this beautifully skilled quarterback? Did everybody miss on it? Yes, he went to Washington State and put up huge numbers under Mike Leach. But at the end of the day, when we break it down just into pure passing ability and a skill set that translates to the Sunday game, you know, that's where it kind of sat for Gardner Minshew. And I've got every reason in the world to hope that Gardner Minshew works out for the Jags. But if you're going to tell me that the Jags, with that war chest of picks that they have for the 2020 draft and even beyond, the package that they could put together to move up perhaps into that top 3 and go get Tua, yeah. I think the Jags, though, are taking the approach right now that, hey, look, the fan base is happy with Gardner Minshew. We'll sell off pretty much everyone else that is truly impactful to our club's chances of competing for the playoffs anytime soon. And if it doesn't work out, if the bottom falls out for the Jags, completely falls out for the Jags in 2020, you're looking at that next quarterback crop and you're thinking, hey, we're in the mix for Trevor Lawrence. We're in the mix for Justin Fields. We're going to be okay at quarterback, whether it's this year or next year. But there's maybe not that sense of urgency. And you also don't have to give up anything to make that move like you would if you did it now. You're able to maintain just that incredibly deep war chest of picks and look ahead to 2021 and beyond, perhaps. We're going to head to our first break. When we come back, we're going to check in with Cecil Hurt of the Tuscaloosa News and Tidesports.com. We got a lot to get to with Cecil. When SFS, presented by Peterbrook Chocolatier, returns on Tide 100.9 FM right after this. In 1942, the late, great First Lady of Soul, Aretha Franklin. So, yeah, it's going to be all Aretha for the soundtrack on this Wednesday. Analyst for BamaOnline.com. with you each and every weekday morning from 11 a.m. until noon. We've got some topics for you out there on this Tuesday. We hit on some Alabama basketball, men's basketball already. We touched on the Tua effect of his social media presence leading up to this 2020 NFL draft. And by the way, we're still trying to figure out exactly when that draft will happen. I mean, the NFL, Roger Goodell, he's standing pat. Roger's standing pat on April 23rd to the 25th, despite getting feedback from pretty much every one of the 32 clubs that we might need to look at postponing this thing, Roger. And Roger isn't he's not stepping away from that penciled in date of the 23rd to the 25th in April. I thought Adam Schefter had a pretty good idea this morning on the ESPN. Adam Schefter suggested turning the draft into one round per night. Why not? It's not like we're going to have anything else in all likelihood in late April. Why not go a round a night? Saw some people comment, no, nobody will care after round 3. If it's like it is right now, a month from now, you'll be there every night. You'll be there for that 6th round. You'll absolutely be there. Content. That's what these networks are really in need of right now. 205-342-9904. Let's head to the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line right now. Check in with Cecil Hurt of the Tuscaloosa News and Tidesports.com. Cecil, how you hanging in there, my man?
Doing well, thanks.
I think we're all kind of in that same situation right now. We're trying to heed all the precautions, trying to do everything we can to keep ourselves healthy, and certainly those that we come into contact, either knowingly or unknowingly. And the latest to sort of reemphasize that message, Cecil, has been Nick Saban, who we hadn't heard from really since the start of this pandemic in earnest. What do you think that tweet yesterday, that social media release yesterday, and I think there's been even another one maybe today that's been released. What type of impact do you think that has on not just a...
Well, I think it has some. I think it's important for community leaders, which, he's not a politician, but he's certainly a community leader, to let people know what they need to do and what the best course of action will take, and, to show how they're handling it. And as Nick Saban has said many times, he is not a sit-at-home guy. He had the hip replacement. He was at the office the next morning. He couldn't take it anymore, sitting around the house. So it's certainly been tough on him, but, you have to do what's best for everybody, not just for yourself. And so I think that's a good message for him to put out there.
Just a totally different world for all of us right now. And definitely when you talk about coaching staffs, especially football staffs, because of the size of the staffs involved, different for basketball because you're limited more to maybe, in terms of on the floor assistants and the head coach, more along the lines of 4 or 5, maybe your director of basketball ops certainly involved in that too. But, And even with technology being what it is, I'm sure there's still an adjustment period to all this for Nick Saban on a daily basis.
I'm sure there is, and I'm sure he's doing as much as he can do in terms of getting on the phone with recruits and Skyping and teleconferencing as much as he can with recruits out there. There's probably some kind of teleconference staff meeting every day to keep up with who's contacted which recruits and keep all that organized. And, of course, I guess in a certain way, there's more time to break down film. I think there probably comes a point where you've broken it down all it can be broken down, but they'll continue to work at that. But, sure, it's a big operation. You count the players and the coaches and the nutritionists and the strength coaches and the trainers and managers. It's probably 300 people to organize a day's practice and meals and so forth, and he's in charge of all of it. So and he likes to be hands-on, and I think Alabama fans certainly like for him to be hands-on. So it's been a big adjustment for him, no question.
Well, now that you mention all that, I've noticed some temporary internet outages in Northeast Tuscaloosa, Cecil. It may be that Nick is, got like 74 people on a Skype conference call or something. Now that you mention it, Cecil, one person we have also heard from here in the last day is Nate Oates, the men's basketball coach at the University of Alabama. Always find his comments to be insightful. You like guys like Nate if you're in the media or even a fan, because you ask the guy a question and he's pretty much going to tell you exactly where things sit at that moment. And I thought he was pretty revealing, although not unexpected in what he had to say about his roster and a couple of the key pieces to this most recent team in Kyra Lewis Jr. and John Petty Jr.
Well, I think that you've got to approach it the way that he's approaching it, which is that they won't be back, and you've got to recruit to their spot. And if they decide to come back, then that's when you balance the checkbook. That's when you make everything work numbers-wise. I'm sure he would love to have guys in workout, see what they were doing in the off-season, see how, as he's talked about, see how dedicated they were to improving, because he's got guys, and I don't know the names. I don't know what the rankings are, but he's got guys it's very unlikely Beetle would get an extra year. Doesn't sound like the NCAA is going to do that for winter sports. So he's got one signee so far, and certainly two spots open. Raymond Hawkins haven't entered the transfer portal, and Beetle. So that's one spot, but he's going to recruit more than one guy if he possibly can for the upcoming signing period, whether that gets pushed back or not. I don't know why they would push back the April 15th, because they're extending it for guys that want to visit campuses. But I don't know why, if a guy's got his mind made up on April 15th, what difference does it make if he signs his national letter on April 15th? That doesn't change. There's no value to pushing that back. If he doesn't have his mind made up, extend the period and give him a chance to take visits. That's what he wants to do, he or she, because it's also true for the women, who I think got a commitment, junior college player earlier this week. So, give them enough time on the back end if they want to take their visits. But if their mind's made up on April the 15th, let them sign. I hope that that's what the commissioners will do. We'll see. I think that would be best for everybody and reduce a little bit of the chaos. But at that point, you're going to start counting numbers, and they're going to recruit to Kyra's spot and John's spot, and if one or both of them do come back, and that changes the calculus a little bit. And if they keep signing more, so they sign 4 guys in the spring period. So they're going to have to do a lot of evaluation. Some of it's going to be tough evaluation, but we'll see how it shakes out. Their one big concern now on that is you don't want to really dip below 13. Nate saw how quickly that can dissipate last season. So what if the NBA pushes its draft back from, what if they try and play a season? What if they're playing in June? What if they say we're going to start our playoffs June the 1st? Even if they have a short playoff schedule, everything 3 of 5, except the championship series would be 4 of 7. I've seen that proposal. But they may be playing until, the 1st of August.
Yeah.
And they'd have to have a draft after that. Well, school's about to start at that point. So there's a million moving pieces to that right now. If they're going to play, they're not. I guess they have the staff to also bring guys in and evaluate, turn that draft around pretty quick once the season ends. But it puts Nate Oates in particular in a bind in terms of who he's going to have when the scholarships have to be calculated in August. before school starts. You don't want to be out there trying to find a guy in the last 2 weeks to fill a spot that you didn't count on. So there are a lot of moving pieces to it. I think we'll gradually have some news on comings and goings, and almost like the old AP transaction wire. Maybe starting this week. I think you might see an addition this week, and to the signee list anyway. Guys are going into the portal. Guys are entering the draft, pulling out of the draft. That may affect what other guys do. It's very complicated right now.
Yeah, when you try to do the math, it literally is like a day-by-day situation. Raymond Hawkins, the freshman forward, went into the transfer portal. The assumption is, I guess, Cecil, that you have to go off, as we heard from Nate Oates yesterday, that you're anticipating departures from Kyra Lewis Jr. and John Petty.
You got to recruit to fill those spots.
You got to recruit to fill those three. You already got Keon Ambrose Hilton in the early period, and you know that Beetle Bolden is moving on. So, man, the math is sort of moving, it seems like. And Josh Primo, I guess, is who we're talking about as the potential addition on Friday.
He said he's going to make a decision on Friday, or indicated that he's going to make a decision on Friday.
Right.
One way or the other. It looks like Alabama or Creighton.
I worry, Cecil. He's from Toronto. Toronto's the Blue Jays, and Creighton, of course, the Blue Jays. Is it time to panic, Cecil? Am I connected?
I don't know that I've ever heard of a recruitment coming right down to that. But,
this could come down to Joe Carter.
Both so he's, they've got some guys that have not visited, and it hurts them. If you're an SEC school, it's just Alabama, but it's certainly true at Alabama. And you're recruiting against a Creighton, and you bring a young fellow in here on A-Day. A-Day weekend's a big weekend for juniors to come in.
Yeah.
And there's parties, and there's a lot going on, and the weather's like it is today. It's an attractive place to come. So they lose that this year. Just one of the things they're going to have to work around. So, there's a big difference in visiting Tuscaloosa on April the 18th and Omaha on April the 18th. I'll promise you that.
Talking with Cecil Hurt of the Tuscaloosa News and Tidesports.com at Southern Fried Sports, presented by Peterbrook Chocolatier. We probably should be talking more about how this is impacting recruiting in just about every sport, because between evaluation periods and signing periods and those windows that each of the respective sports have, it seems like, Cecil, there isn't a sport that's not going to be touched by all this from a recruiting perspective.
I haven't heard one person mention this, but what if the way football works out, they're doing – this would be great, actually. Probably a best-case scenario. They're doing some kind of spring practice in June. Well, you can't have camps if you're doing spring practice.
Yeah.
And all those camps where they're not called this, but let's be honest, there's a lot of evaluation going on at those camps. So how do you balance those things out? That's just one of the things. And we're back on football now. That's just one of the things they have to work out. But I don't have to tell you. You're well aware that June is a heavy evaluation month. I mean, you can read now this guy or that guy has an offer, but those offers get more or less real once they see you in a camp, whether it's on their campus especially, but an all-star camp. That's when a lot of decisions are made. And what is the schedule for any of that going to be in the summer? I have no idea, but I guess we'll start to get some answers next week. That March 30 date. They're going to try and set some things up, but they've also got to have contingencies. As I wrote last week, what if you can't guarantee that the season gets started?
Yeah.
On Labor Day weekend, what if what if you can't squeeze a spring in? And that's a long way away, but they're talking about some long-term ramifications. I mean, you can't. We already basically know you can't have guys back on campus until school starts. Until May. There's a lot of ramifications to doing that. You have to check guys out. You don't want somebody to bring something in that the whole team then has to be quarantined. So I think that at least one of the things that they need to be looking at is a September 20 type start date.
Mm-hmm.
That costs you a game or two games. Would you rather have a 10-game schedule or a no-game schedule?
You can't mess around with this, Cecil, because literally all it takes is one person in your organization to test positive, right? And
sure, absolutely.
And now the entire operation is quarantined. And it's almost, this is to a lesser degree, it's almost like weather delays have become in sports, right? If there's a lightning strike, that means 30 more minutes. You know what I'm saying? In terms of weather delays with baseball and sports like that.
Right.
And you could put yourself in a position where you're just consistently having to push back if you don't take the required time and allow for the time frame, I guess.
Right. And, right now, I mean, what are the options? Let's say you said, my gosh, we're going to bring them in, we got dorm space, we got a dining hall, we're going to bring them in April the 1st. Well, you got to test them all.
Yeah.
Where are you going to get 200 tests for your players and coaches and trainers and managers?
Yeah. It's such a big operation, man.
What are the optics of the Alabama and Auburn football team getting 400 tests when there's people in Tuscaloosa, Birmingham, Auburn, wherever they might be, having a hard time getting tests?
Can't get ventilators, let alone tests.
Yeah. So there's a lot of, again, there's a lot that we don't know. But the only thing you can do in situations that you don't know is to plan and make contingency plans. And just to sit here and say, it's going to go away, it's going to be fine, that isn't going to work. That's not going to work.
You touched on, you threw the date September 20th out there, understanding that you're not trying to dictate the situation at all, because we know none of us can do that at this point, realistically speaking anyway. That sort of time frame is where Georgia currently sits on the schedule. I know you've written about it. We've talked about it. Dennis Dodd of CBSSports.com sort of outlined a situation of a condensed schedule. What would you envision sort of the procedure being in that type of scenario? Would you just try to use the existing schedule that's out there in a way that you could get a 9-10 game schedule in potentially? Or do you think the SEC, the college football in general, would kind of have to sort of, shuffle the deck and deal it sort of fresh from that perspective?
I think the best scenario is to go to 10 conference games. Now, you immediately get your Georgia Tech people or your Clemson, South Carolina people, Florida State, who say, we play every year, this is our big rival, this is our big game. Hey, people are going to have to make some sacrifices this year. Maybe that's not a sacrifice that people are going to make. Then say, all right, we're going to play a 10-week schedule. We're going to have one non-conference game. You're not playing it at the end of the year. You're not going to do it. If you want to play it, we're going to have a non-conference opener for everybody. And if you want to play Florida, if you want to play Florida State in that opener, fire away. Let's go. Be a lot of interest. But I would like to see 10 conference games. I wouldn't be opposed in a 10-week schedule to 9 conference games and 1 non-conference game. And then you're just for this year, we're not getting into the playoff debate for the long term, but for 1 year, all this stuff that gets talked about, let's do it and see. What year is there ever going to be that's going to be better to experiment? because things are going to be changed anyway. So why not make it an 8-team playoff? And 5 of the teams are your Power 5 conference champions. So, whoever wins that conference, because you're playing a 10-game schedule. If you want to play a championship game, there's room for that. There's room for Army, Navy. But if you want to play a 10-game schedule and then have a championship game, then your champion is who goes. And then you have your group of 5 representative and your 2 wild cards. People sit there, I wrote that column and people are like, well, the group of 5 is just, hey, we're going to do it for 1 year and see.
Yeah.
And maybe the group of 5 team gets blown out 63-0, and then you got some information that you can go forward. Maybe they play a great game. Maybe Memphis would have gone to Clemson and played a good game, and been exciting and up and down last year, and play it that way. See how it goes, and find out if 8 is too many. If there's interest in 8, if it's the logistics of hosting 8 are impossible. Because right now, every year we talk about all that stuff, and we have no actual working experiment to back it up. So everybody can say, 4, it should be 4, it should be 8. This conference shouldn't get in. This, hey, you've got 2 wild cards. If that doesn't cover it, better luck next year. We got less than realistically we got less than 2 wild cards right now. Last year was 4 conference champions, and a 5th conference champion got left out. So you're actually helping somebody that didn't get in. And I don't know who the 2 wild cards would have been last year. I guess Georgia would have been one based on the way the final rankings came out. And maybe one of the Big Ten teams, Wisconsin, Iowa, somebody, Penn State. So, and play it that way for a year. There'll never be a better year to try it and see. And it goes back to the way it was in 2021. But then when you're talking about 26 or whatever the next contract is, then if people loved it, and people are going to love extra games, I get that. But you'll know if the commissioners loved it, if coaches loved it, if players loved it, you'll know all that. Whereas now we talk about it endlessly, nonstop, all the time, with no information about it. We had never done it. So why not do it one time?
Cecil, we talk about crowning champions, and I wanted to get your opinion on this because we didn't have that official closure to the college basketball season, either for the men or the women. As far as official designations for, say, a national champion, where do you sort of fall on that, with Kansas finishing the season ranked number 1 in the polls on the men's side, South Carolina number 1 on the women's side? Do you think we should hand those designations out, or is it just pretty much a vacant situation?
Well, I mean, the AP poll is there. If Kansas wants to claim it, South Carolina women want to claim it, fine with me. Times change. Alabama has a bunch of football championships that are just AP poll, finished first in AP poll, or finished 20th in AP poll in one case. But does that mean that everybody's going to recognize the Kansas champion? No. And I think one of the many positives and charms of March Madness is who knew last year that it was going to be Virginia. They didn't win. They weren't the number 1 team at the end of the year. Would it have been Dayton this year? Would it have been Oregon? You love to see it played out. You love to see that play out. If Kansas wants to hang a banner that says AP national champions, I got no complaint about anybody hanging any banners. I don't think anybody at Alabama has any complaints about people saying that an AP championship in a year where you don't have a playoff, an AP championship is a championship, because Alabama certainly believes that in the 60s when they didn't have any kind of playoff. And those were championships. So it didn't play out the way anybody want it to. Generally, we're so attached to March Madness that I don't
It's
think
the
most
essence.
people
It's
would
the essence of the
recognize that,
sport.
But
Yeah.
if they want to hang a banner, I'm fine with it.
And you can put it on the rings. You can put number 1 on the rings, and stuff like that. I'm sure that's what matters the most to the players, right?
Yeah, and in Kansas' case, they can't come back and make them forfeit it later anyway.
It may have been vacated regardless.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
So they,
jeez.
we'll see how that HBO special goes next week.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Hey, Cecil, as always, great stuff with us here. We always appreciate it. Always great stuff, as we know, at the Tuscaloosa News and Tidesports.com as well. Stay safe, Cecil.
Okay, talk to you soon.
There you go, Cecil Hurt. And it is, to me, it's an interesting topic. For me, when I consider Kansas and the South Carolina, look, yeah, I'm kind of with Cecil in that you want to recognize it in terms of your ranking once the season was suspended and you had the cancellation of the NCAA tournament. But, man, the big dance is the essence of college basketball. If we had, it is similar to, I understand, some of the Alabama football championships. But, see, the difference there is that we never had a playoff before that. And then in the 60s or even 41, I guess, you had Alabama claiming national championships without a playoff. I mean, in our lifetimes, this is what we know with college basketball is a playoff, a tournament. And you got to win 6 games, man, in March. That's the way it is in hoops. And so, yeah, like Cecil said, if the players want to recognize it, the programs want to recognize it, I would think that's a little below a storied program like Kansas to hang that banner, as national champs in a season in which there was no NCAA tournament. That reeks more of kind of a UCF-ish in football type of scenario. But hey, it is what it is, right? Unfortunately, that's where we're at right now. Going to head to a break when we come back. More of Southern Fried Sports on a Wednesday on Tide 100.9 FM right after this. Back with more of a Wednesday edition of Southern Fried Sports right here on Tide 100.9 FM. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BamaOnline.com with you each and